I think everyone needs to actively participate to, change the world. And if you're awake, you can take some action.
What is fairness? 1. Impartial and just treatment or behavior without favoritism or discrimination. 2. The quality of having light-colored hair or a pale complexion. Okay, no favoritism or discrimination sounds pretty good. But the very definition of being white, pale complexion, also embedded in the vocabulary itself of what just treatment means? Does this mean that we should start building a new grammar? Or at least, re-examine our conception of fairness and take a closer look at our current situation? Affirmative action. First of all, when did it start? And when did it end? And what is it? Affirmative action, the widely known version of it, is a method of redressing discrimination that had persisted in spite of civil rights laws and constitutional guarantees, was introduced by President Kennedy in 1961. Historically and internationally, support for affirmative action has sought to achieve goals such as bridging inequalities in employment and pay, increasing access to education, promoting diversity, and redressing apparent past wrongs, harms, or hindrances.
The goal of affirmative action was to try to undo years, centuries of wrong. That there was the desire to try to make it possible for people to come to a level playing field.
The hot question is it fair to create a system for people of certain race to have certain rights because of their race? For example, institutions creating racial quotas and admitting applicants based on race. That would be pretty extreme.
The accusation was, then you're looking for quotas of people. We're going to bring in this many women, this many men, this many straight, this many gay, and not all these issues. Race was the critical issue, but the idea, this many black, this many native, indigenous, this many, this many European, whatever the goals were. But it seemed like, by then thinking quotas, or what they accused it of doing was taking quotas, it made it that, then maybe you're not getting the best, the smartest, the most worthy.
Affirmative action ended in 1996 with Proposition 209. As we look around the country, certain races do get rights, still automatically, while other certain races still do not have access to those same rights.
It is society that sort of creates this idea of like, what is Asian, what is black, what is white, what is Hispanic, like these type of things. And it's this sort of like category that we like put on these definitions of these people into this sort of category. So like, what does it mean to be like Asian? What does it mean to be like Hispanic? What does it mean to be like, this type of thing?
I consider that kind of form of racism because they profile you.
The police actually formed a line and stopped us specifically. It was like,
you and your friend?
Yeah, me and him. It was like 10 police came out and stopped us, stood in front of us. Now you got all these other people over there making all this. Ain't none of them black, but they making all this commotion and everything. They stop us.
See, when you hear kids, pull that slant eye trick with their eyes, right? And we laugh about it. But I don't think a 5-year-old comes up with that slanted thing. Yeah. I don't think the N-word coming out of 5-year-old. I don't think a 5-year-old created the N-word. It was learned. Mm-hmm. It was passed down.
Exactly.
So who gave that 5-year-old who called Abdullah the N-word, who taught that 5-year-old to say that? So when we say that it's not here or it's not systemic, who teaches the next generations of kids to hate at that level?
We like to say to the world, this country values fairness. In today's climate, it is more so important that we're not talking about definition number 2. The white affirmative action.
I think of what we call affirmative action, meaning the consideration of race and gender, let's say, and things like higher education. I think of that as really second wave affirmative action, because the first wave of affirmative action, and this is somewhat kind of a snarky way to say it, but the first wave of affirmative action was, the hundreds of years prior to that, when consideration of gender and race benefited white men, right? So it's somewhat of a fallacy, I think, to see affirmative action that responds to the needs of women and people of color as something that's new, because our society has been engaged in some form of consciousness about race and gender for a very, very, very long time. So I think of affirmative action, as we talk about it now, really as a second wave happening.
The so-called affirmative action, which is banned in 1996, was a second wave.
If affirmative action is race-based access to institutional resources and opportunities, when was it legislated? 1618. Is this affirmative action? If you're white, you get 50 acres of land, 30 shillings, 10 bushels of corn, and a musket, solely based on the color of your skin, not for any other reason? What about the Naturalization Act of 1790? Says if you're white, you can become a citizen. This isn't about anything except the color of your skin. Not merit, not hard work, not meeting the criteria, just being white, the color of your skin. You have access to a loan. You have access to a neighborhood. You can live in this neighborhood if you're white. So was this country built on affirmative action for white people?
According to the podcast series Seeing White, affirmative action already happened back in 1681. 1681, when white people were given land solely because of their skin color. Although the affirmative action we widely talk about started in 1961, the real action already happened a long, long time ago. Affirmative action, in other words, embodies both fairness and unfairness, but depends on what side of the definition you look at it from.
In my mind, is not about the individual students who are admitted under it. It's about a corrective, medicinal disruption of a system that fails to see the value and the merit of, in this case, women and people of color. So to get rid of affirmative action, or to have 209 in place, to me is like removing medicine from a sick patient, and the patient here is the system. So from my way of thinking, no, it's a terrible idea, but it is the law of the land. It's still the law of the land.
Racism is not just ignorance. It's playing on people's anxieties, like social anxieties and fears. So people. So the white working class, for example, can have anxieties, and justified and valid anxieties about job security. So their job security has been taken away from them. But those anxieties have been redirected then to target people of color, also working class, immigrants. They're being blamed for taking away the jobs, which is ludicrous. And so there's justified anxieties because policies have been enacted upon people, then get redirected so they get other people blamed rather than government policies. And so those anxieties are always going to be there. People are always going to be afraid of losing their jobs, losing their housing, because of government policies.
It was written in 1992 about how education's purpose should be to prepare us to be productive members of a democracy. So you think about that, right? What do? We bring kids into school and we go, no, don't have your own opinion, right? Don't have your own interests. Just do this math and learn it really well and do this, right? Kindergarten, first grade, right? We start early. So what happens? Kids just check out. So maybe the problem is that we should fix kindergarten so that we have more enthused people coming through the school system and we have better structured education so that they're getting what they need. But even I would bet a lot of you live in I got in here, you know? So now you're in that mode of, I'm at Cal, I'm one of the special people, right? Because that's kind of how we made it all up.
Universities, it can't be relied on universities only or higher education, because those discriminatory policies are right from kindergarten. And so, all the educational systems have to be completely overhauled. And so it actually marks universities as a kind of target if we think it can only be done in universities. If all the way up to age 18 and age 20, discrimination has been happening, it's not sufficient to only address it at age 18.
There are systematic barriers to power inequality, and that's everybody's responsibility, and some more so than others. No one's really free until everybody's free. So in each institution, they should be having a deep conversation about, but that would be acknowledging a history that, it would be actually acknowledging. So, fundamentally there would have to be a deep acknowledgement as a culture. And it's not just, here in the United States, we have our extra special flavor of race. We can't ignore a conversation about race in a country that race is